Good evening and welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I'm your host tonight, JP Morzullo, and I just wanted to let you know that Josh is on another secret mission. I think he's at the DNC trying to figure out whether the crowd is an AI crowd or real people. So we don't know yet. We'll find out when he gets back. And with me tonight, I have a candidate for CD1, Chris Bright. Hi, Chris.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, appreciate you having me.
Yeah, so what we want to try to do tonight for our viewers is just to let them know a little about your background and how you're doing in the race and that kind of thing. But we can, we can go in other directions if you like.
Sure.
So whatever you're free doing with, but I'd like you to start with that. I think it'd be a good way to start.
Start with who I am and
why are you running?
Am I running for Congress?
Right, exactly, exactly.
So I'm Chris Bright. I originally from New Jersey. So
I'm supposed to ask what exit, right?
What exit? Yeah, it's exit 127.
Which is?
A town called Middlesex.
Middlesex.
So I grew up about 25 miles outside of New York City.
Yep.
And then was a good student in high school, but wasn't really applying myself. So in between my freshman and sophomore year, it was summertime, and my dad's like, "Hey, we're going to go to West Point for a football game."
Oh, nice.
And I was like, "Yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm hanging out with my girlfriend Kelly today." He's like, "Yeah, no, you're not." So we went to a football game at West Point. I just fell in love with the place.
Yeah.
And from that point forward, he was evil mind. I think that's what he wanted.
Was your dad in the military?
He was, but he was drafted in Vietnam.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So he had a very different military experience than
Sure.
I did. I mean, he was like, "Well, we didn't do that when I was in the military." I was like,
Sure.
"Buddy, you had a pet monkey when you were in the military that lived in the barracks, so it's
Exactly.
it's a little bit different right now." But so I really from sophomore year on, that's all I wanted to do was go to West Point.
Oh wow! So you buckled down, you got your grades up.
Buckled down, yeah, kind of got focused, got dialed in. I was a 3-sport athlete in high school, very involved, and so kind of had that package that they were looking for. Just made sure we
Sure.
kind of checked all the right boxes.
So what sports were you involved with?
So in high school, I ran cross country, which it's funny because I just hate running, But our football team had not won a game in 4 years when I was coming in,
Yeah.
and I was a big wrestler. And so
Okay.
the wrestling coach was the cross-country coach.
Oh, so
we really had no choice. It was
Right.
you're going to go, you're going to run, and you're going to be in shape
And that
for the
keeps
rest
you in
of the
shape.
season.
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely.
So you'd roll right into that.
And what weight did you wrestle at?
So I finished senior year wrestling 160.
Oh,
but
wow.
I think I was 125, 135, 145, and then 160.
Yeah.
So and I love that sport.
Yep.
It's one of those sports where you can go out, get your butt kicked in front of the entire student body and your girlfriend and your family. There's no one to blame but yourself.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
I wrestled in high school, but I was 120, I think.
Okay.
I wrestled at. And I can remember I had to wrestle a kid in the States from Oklahoma. And so they had these
wow.
unbelievable guys,
Yeah.
right? So I lost enough weight so I didn't have to wrestle him.
Listen, that's
how
good
that
enough
works.
motivation
you
for me.
You spit and you drink nothing.
Right,
and
the rubber suits.
Yeah,
the heat.
exactly.
Yeah. No,
So
it was
go
a
ahead. I
great
didn't mean to
sport.
sidetrack.
No,
So-
it's all good.
So wrestling and cross country?
Wrestling, cross country. I played baseball in the spring.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
What
So
position did you play?
I was center field.
There you go.
I love the outfield.
So all that cross country running helped you, didn't it?
Yeah, I guess so.
probably
I guess it did. I guess it did.
Yeah.
5 days after high school graduation, I left for West Point.
Wow.
So didn't have much of a senior year, but that's okay. That dream kind of met. It's what I wanted to do. And then West Point was, as I'm sure you've heard, pretty intense experience.
Yeah.
So I went to airborne school. I worked over in the U.S. Embassy in Beijing.
Oh, wow.
The coursework, physics, Chinese. I took Chinese. That's a funny story. So freshman year, you come in and they're like, "Hey, everybody has to take a language. What language do you want?" And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I could order? If I went home on vacation
And ordered Chinese.
and I could order Chinese food in Chinese, yeah. And so at a school that is notorious for incredibly hard workloads, I shot myself in the foot. And instead of having something like Spanish or something a little bit easier to BS my way through.
Sure. So you took Chinese.
There I was taking Mandarin Chinese.
So do you still understand any of it? Or
I could say something like "wo shi ni de mao xie xi," which means "I am your cat, thank you." So I have zero fluency left at this point.
I love that.
Yeah.
You don't say that at a Chinese restaurant, though,
No,
right?
yeah, what I do is I'll tell my friends if they're like, "Oh, you speak Chinese? Like, tell me something to say."
And you give them that to say?
I do, yeah. So one of my best friends from West Point, he was a special forces officer, and the exact thing. He was like, "Hey, tell me something cool to say in Chinese."
Right.
Years later, we regroup at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, Captain's Career Course. And we were out there BSing, probably drinking some beer, smoking cigars or something, and he says, "By the way, speaking of that, wo shi ni de mao xie xi, what does that actually mean?" Because he goes, "I said that one time, and I was laughed right out of the place." And I said, "Oh, that means I am your cat, thank you." And so, yeah, so that's kind of my bar trick with Chinese. So no, I'm not fluent in that anymore. But I do understand that culture, spent some time there, it's fascinating. I think I have some pretty good insights from my time over in China. On what that culture is all about, you know, and how that relates to geopolitics. You know, I obviously am able to connect some of those dots.
So where were you in China?
So I was mostly in Beijing.
Beijing, yeah.
Yeah. That was when Hong Kong was going back to the mainland.
Right.
So that was 96, maybe going into 97, and went over there for a year, and in the morning would go to like the Beijing Language Institute. And and then in the afternoon we would go over to the embassy and we'd do kind of like staff work and you know, kind of like whatever they needed the intern to do.
Yeah.
You know, just below going being the coffee guy. But cool experience nonetheless. Yeah.
So you graduated from West Point. You went right into 3 years more or 4 years more. Or
West Point's an 8-year commitment.
Okay.
5 active duty.
Yep. And
then 3 in the reserve. So when I graduated, I branched engineers. So, you know, Corps of Engineers, but I liked that branch because it was out of all of the different branches, like infantry, armor, aviation, field artillery, military intelligence, you name it, there's a ton. That was, to me, the most diverse. So you could be a diver in the engineers.
Right.
You could be like literally organized as infantry and kind of embedded into an infantry unit, or you could be heavy construction and doing a lot of nation building, and I did all of that.
Wow.
And so that was so impactful in my life for so many different reasons. One, there you are, 22, 23 years old, you're in charge of a platoon, you know, 30, 35 people. And it kind of instills in you, you know, like some of the blocking and tackling of leadership. And one of the things they used to say to us was, you know, you don't wear the rank on your collar for personal gain, you wear it for, you know, to advance, you know, the needs and get what you need for your unit, your guys. And I think that that's lost just across the board now, whether it's corporate leadership or the government, especially the government, where you just see folks that are there and they're leveraging their positions to get rich or to get powerful or whatever that looks like. And that was exactly the antithesis of what they teach at West Point. You know, in fact, I talked about that last night at a speech. There were 2 kind of lessons learned early on. So when I left 5 days after, you go through what's called Beast Barracks, which is that 8-week summer training boot camp. Fast, furious, you're learning about how to be a cadet at West Point, all while going through the exact same stuff that soldiers do in basic training. And then you're having to memorize a ton of knowledge. Speeches and maximum effective range of an M16 and stupid stuff like, "Sir, how's the cow?" And you'd say, "She walks, she talks, she's full of chalk, the lacteal fluid, blah, blah." All these things that they just fill your head with. But they say you have 4 responses. Yes, sir, or ma'am. So yes, sir, or ma'am. No, sir. No excuse, sir. Or sir, I do not understand. And that's it. So there was one, semester, freshman year, I lost my history paper. It was like the kind of capstone exercise. A little floppy disk got corrupted and I lost it. And so I worked to redo this paper and I missed the commandant's briefing, which is a 1-star general. He was just going to give us kind of the scoop on what was going to be going on with summer training. And I didn't show up to that because I was redoing a paper that if I didn't redo this paper, I would have failed. But coming out of that meeting, they said, Bright, were you at this commandant's lecture? And I said, what are 4 excuses? No, sir. Why were you not there? No excuse.
Right.
And that's impactful for an 18 and 19-year-old. It doesn't matter what the mission is.
Right.
You have to get the job done. There literally is no excuse. And then the second thing that kind of came out of West Point was they said, you always let your soldiers eat first.
Exactly.
So like in the Navy, like your go Army, beat Navy, or beat Navy hat, beat Army hat. The Navy has their own mess hall for officers, same with the Air Force, but the Army's different. So the Army, when you're out in the field and it's time to eat, all your soldiers go first, and then you eat last. You take care of the people that are under your command. Yeah. And I think that that's really impactful, and that's really kind of shaped how I view leadership, how I view my role when I'm, trying to kind of get a group together to make mission.
So before we go any further, I think someone brought you in something to drink so that you wouldn't be dry.
Yeah.
So if you want to go ahead and
sure, take that,
that would be good. Like I said, it's pretty casual, and but I think that's probably more important than you think, right?
Yeah, right.
So, well, that's great. I mean, I think that's. Italian families kind of run that way a little bit too.
Yep.
You make sure everybody else eats first at your house, and you're the last one to eat.
Absolutely.
And so, go ahead. Let's go from there. Why are you running? Or do you want to talk more about? Does this lead into?
Yeah, you know what it does. I think my whole story, on how I ended up in this spot is one of making one jump for another. At the time, you might not realize, why things happened the way they did. But looking back, geez, if it wasn't a path to get me to this point.
Right.
So when I was commissioned, I went over to Egypt and we did a joint exercise over there. Was a platoon leader, so I was in charge of about 30 people, and then got promoted. So when I went over to Bosnia, I was the CIMIC engineer, CIMIC, and it stood for Civil Military Commission. And I was kind of plucked out of my unit. I had a good career going at that point. And so commander picked me to go over and attach to this group going over to do geopolitical work in Bosnia. So I went over there, and quickly we were embedded with other units. And so a lot of interesting opportunities, but one of the things that was fascinating for me was working in this town called Srebrenica. And Srebrenica had was impacted by genocide, and they killed every male over the age of 14. And so when we came in to kind of keep the peace and help this country to get back on its feet, the town of Srebrenica was a bunch of women and young kids. And just culturally, they were not the breadwinners.
Right.
And so I was tapped to work with these folks, help them with business, help them, start a business. This is what a balance sheet looks like. Truth be told, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I was 24, 25 years old, but I studied economics in college.
There you go.
But it was incredibly rewarding to work with those types of people. And so it was those types of geopolitical projects that I was doing, and then turn around and say, oh, we need a school built, or this road's out, and we would work with USAID to help them get back on their feet. Got promoted again. Bosnia ended up becoming more unstable than we originally thought. So we went home early because the situation wasn't ready for us to go and do a lot of this work. So came back, rejoined my unit, and then we went over to Kosovo because at the time, the U.S. military was kind of just over in the Balkans playing whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
Started in Bosnia, and then we went to Kosovo, and then Macedonia flared up, and so we kind of chased that. And then over in Kosovo, again, a lot of similar work where we were doing kind of nation-building geopolitical work, all of which has kind of fed into my deep, foreign policy experience that I look at now as I think about shaping foreign policy and kind of my role in Congress. I come with a very, very interesting skill set, having been twice deployed to a combat zone. And oh, by the way, I always point out on the trail, when I was in Bosnia, just 16 years earlier, from that exact spot in Sarajevo, they hosted the Winter Olympics.
Yep. Yeah.
And how
amazing
fast a government can fall and crumble and a country can collapse under poor leadership.
Sure.
You know, so really, really impactful at 25 years old to see that, see the way these people were fighting, understand the history and the role that you're playing in that.
Yeah.
So came out of that. What brought me here to New England was I decided we were going to get out. I was married to another Army officer at the time. I'm going to go to MIT. I want to go to business school, and I want to go to MIT because I think like I need to learn a little bit more of the analytics and kind of the math side of business, and applied and got in. Had to take an economics class because my grades were lower at West Point, and I was like, do you know what I just went through? Like, that place is hard, right? Like,
right.
So they're like, yeah, we get it, but take an economics class and get an A and prove to us that you can do the coursework here. And so I ended up getting an entire master's in public policy from the University of Missouri in the pursuit of just taking that one economics class. And then moved here and got an MBA from MIT. So I moved here in 2005. And been here ever since. So New Hampshire became home last year, where for the first time since leaving, for the military, I've lived the longest in New Hampshire than I've lived anywhere else. So
what brought you to New Hampshire, though? There were certainly other choices you could have made, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, when I was looking at MIT, we were obviously first started looking around school, but do I really want to live in the People's Republic of Massachusetts? So
we know that answer.
Even then, even 20 years ago, it was not in an area that or like the politics were just not aligned. And a Army buddy of mine was from Derry, and actually suggested to take a look at Derry.
Nice.
We came up, and then just fell in love with it. Fell in love with the land and the space and the kind of the mantra, live free or die, and the people. It was just, it felt right.
Sure.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the prelude to why you decided to run, I guess, right? To change things. You've seen countries collapse because of poor leadership.
Yep.
And, we're seeing some of that now. That's happening now all across the world. But it's kind of scary now that if you take a look at the politics in this country, things need to change, and hopefully for the better. And so you decided to run for Congress.
Yeah.
Based on your background, based on what you wanted to see happen in government in the United States, or?
Yeah, I mean, you hit a nail on the head. Boy, does it ever need to change.
Yeah.
I was sitting back, I thought maybe I would always get into politics at some point. I was a political science major at West Point, did geopolitical work. In 2021, the Army called me back in. Mm-hmm. I was a team leader within a civil affairs unit. Okay. And so the civil affairs are like the geopolitical arm of the Army.
Right.
And they're parked under special forces. So I was working in a special forces group with a lot of these cutting edge soldiers. And I had already been frustrated, but one of the things that really got to me back in 2021 was there was Navy SEALs that we trained with, the Army Special Forces. And that year, we had 2 range weekends laid out. So the Army will lay out a year's worth of training, so you know what's on the pipe. And 2 different weekends, we had range training, where tip of the spear guys that we need to be sharp are supposed to go and put rounds down range and qualify. Right. Both of those got canceled.
Wow.
It was for logistical reasons or money or whatever. But both of those times, we slotted in DEI training. So I flew from New Hampshire down to Homestead Air Reserve Base in Florida.
Yep. To
link up with a bunch of badasses so we can learn the proper use of pronouns and all this other stuff. And I was like, this is maddening.
I would have lost it right there.
It's maddening. Like, what are we doing to our readiness and the things we're focused on? So
what year was that, 21?
That was 2021.
Wow.
Yeah.
So here we are 3 years later.
Oh, it hasn't gotten better.
No.
And then also at that time, like coming out of COVID, so a year earlier, I built this company, American Facilities Professionals. And I'll tell you that story. We'll get into that in a little bit. But at that time, we were like I had been doing every job myself, and I worked really hard. I landed a first contract in Merrimack, and then COVID hits, and they said, "Hey, we can't have you come in now because this whole coronavirus." So we lost the contract, and I was like, "This is how it ends. How do you build a company through a global pandemic when it's just you?" And I've been through the grind, and we should go back. I want to tell you my story, but to finish this thought. We got into hypochlorous acid in commercial disinfection. I pushed my chips all in. It was like, this is gonna be it, or I'm gonna go out of business. I didn't see any other path.
Right.
And we got really good at this stuff. We were, I got brought in with the VA, a buddy of mine that was doing some work over there. He kind of looped me in, and we became one of the country's foremost experts on commercial disinfection. And hypochlorous acid, not many people have heard of. It's salt and water put through an electrolyzed process. And it's 1,000 times more powerful than bleach, but it's actually, you could spray it in your eyes because like our bodies produce it. That was the gold standard back then, but you didn't hear about it because consumer packaged goods can't produce it, and it had a shelf life of about 6 months. But we started making it, and we went as far away as Kansas doing disinfections, and the company took off. During that time, I'm watching schools get shut down and businesses get shut down. And as an entrepreneur myself, my heart was breaking for these people that were losing their hearts and souls of like what they'd put their whole life into. And I reached out to Chris Pappas, and I said, "Hey, look, I own this company. We've been doing commercial disinfection. In fact, I just co-chaired a roundtable discussion with the Assistant Surgeon General of the United States. I'm 15 minutes down the road. I'd love to come and talk to you about ways we can open up again." And I got this canned message back from a staffer.
Oh, jeez.
I mean, at some point, leaders need to lead. And this was a pandemic, and we needed our people to step up. Here was somebody in your own district that had just very specific knowledge on what we can do, and you don't even want to hear from me?
Right.
I was like, I'm done with this guy.
Yeah.
And so there was that data point. Then I watched the withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Oh, yeah.
I watched how polarized this country is. And my family now, like my parents, both in their late 70s, my mom's on my payroll again for my company because inflation has outpaced their fixed income.
Sure.
So people that I care about are being hurt. We're in absolute disarray. Internationally, no one respects us. I don't think Putin invades Ukraine if Biden wasn't in office.
Yeah.
I think everything that's happening with Taiwan and China, North Korea is allying with the axis of evil. We had what happened on October 7th. I mean, everywhere you look internationally, no one really respects the might of the United States anymore.
Right.
This country is completely fractured and polarized, and we've been pushed into far left and far right camps, and we're screaming at each other.
Yeah.
And there's real problems to solve. I mean, there's a massive, flood of illegal immigration. Everything from gas to groceries is more expensive. And I got to a point where I didn't feel comfortable anymore sitting back thinking someone else could solve this problem.
Exactly, yeah.
And I always, maybe I had imposter syndrome. I was like, well, I've never run before.
Right.
What am I going to do?
Yeah.
But there were a couple people that approached me and said, look, man, you're a business guy. You've built my company is the fastest growing private company in New Hampshire last year, as per Inc.
Good
magazine.
for you.
So we built a $100 million business in 6 years. I bootstrapped that thing. Doing all the jobs myself.
So how many people do you have now?
Well, between our full-time and our 1099 contractors, so we have about 350 people that work for us, and we operate in 44 states. So I combine that with what I saw in the military, the way we lead, kind of the values I have of what a leader should be, coupled with the fact that everything was burning around me.
Right.
Rather than, kind of smoke a cigarette and just watch the flames, I was like, let's jump in and start putting some fires out, and that's how I got to this point.
Well, I think that a lot of people who were in your, entrepreneurs, let's say, they look at it differently than most other people do.
Yeah.
And it's not just about their company and growing it. It's about how you can affect the community you're in, maybe even go further. And it sounds to me like that's the direction you took.
Yeah.
But that had to be a big step, though, to say, okay, I'm going to run for Congress now. I'm sure that didn't happen like overnight, because I've been fed up with some of the people too, but I've never run for Congress. I've held state positions, but and to your point, when you say you got a canned response, quick story on my part is I have an older friend whose son is in Florida, and this friend of mine married. He's from Costa Rica. So this friend of mine married a woman from here, from the United States, and so he's legitimate now. He's, a citizen of the country, but he has a 60-year-old son who lives in Florida and has waited now for 6 or 7 years to get papers so he can stay.
He's doing it the right way.
His visa's running out. He's got 1 more year, and so I thought, well, maybe I could help him. So I made some calls locally, and they said, well, no, because his son's in Florida, you'll have to contact. And, of course, they gave me the Democrat leaders down there. And I made a call to a Republican down there. And when he filled the papers out, the mistake he made was to put on that he lived in New Hampshire. But his son is down there. So they wouldn't do anything. So I made a couple of phone calls to our state senators and our congresspeople, and got some canned responses too.
Yeah.
You need to work it down there. Well, it's not as easy as people think.
Right.
It would have been easier for him to leave the country and then come in illegally, and he would have made it, and there'd be no problems. He's never been arrested. Doesn't have a record. He's not a drug addict,
right.
And yet. But you're right. I mean, this is what. But to your point, people do have a tendency to sit back and say, "What can I do?" But you get to the point in your life where you say, if I don't do it, then who will?
If not me, who? Yeah.
If not me, who?
Yeah.
So, I look at this race. It's kind of interesting because no one seems to be running away with that area. Right. But I think we may have our best shot of winning that seat than we do in CD2. However, we have some good candidates in that race as well. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
About the race?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're right. CD1 is a little bit more in play than CD2, just based on the demographic and how it leans. So I don't know after Annie Custer dropped out, but when she was still in, that started off as 2.5 points Democratic leaning.
Sure.
Whereas CD1 this cycle was rated even.
Yeah.
And, one, it's the demographic, but two, I think Chris Pappas, I think people are a bit frustrated with him and his voting record. Even though he's considered amongst Democrats to be one of the more bipartisan, he's still over 90% voting with Joe Biden.
Sure.
And he's been looked at as a rubber stamp. And the thing that I point to, and if I was a Democrat here in the state, I'd be frustrated with him when they took away the first in the nation.
Right.
If you're a strong representative here in the state, like Claiborne down in South Carolina, they took it away from Pappas and they gave it to him.
Yeah.
Leadership matters. And a guy that's kind of just to go along and get along and tell me how to vote, he's disenfranchising our entire district.
Sure.
He's not up there advocating for us. It's the national party telling him and basically just counting on his vote. And if that doesn't align with the people of New Hampshire, oh well. And I'm frustrated with that. I'm frustrated to being spun. We gave a radio interview this morning, and NHPR, obviously they're more liberal leaning, and we were talking about the border, and she said, well, though that there's been no crossings on our border, and I was just like, that's just not true. And like the CBP itself will tell you, and they're carving out certain numbers. Well, maybe not in this town here in New Hampshire. No, the Swanton sector of our northern border is being completely overrun. There is a disproportionate number of people on watch lists coming over the northern border. And in the last 2 months, they exceeded an entire year's worth of illegal crossings. That's just the people that they caught.
Right.
So you see that, or you see, the economy's better, it's healthy
our jobs,
again. Our jobs are better. Look,
they lost what, 818
right.
jobs or something that, or they're not there. They were never there.
Meanwhile, you'll talk to like your friends or whatever, and they're like, we're not going to go out for date night this week because money's tight. I don't care what your stat. Look, I went to MIT. Like I can make some numbers look any way you want it.
It's
like,
true though.
You can make numbers look however you want that to be.
Sure.
And we're being spun. Like when you see illegals sleeping in Logan Airport.
Oh yeah.
Or when you know that, like at the Army-Navy game, they kicked out all the veterans because they were housing veterans in the hotels around Foxborough. Or when they're sending memos out to VA healthcare that now you're going to go out on community care, and you peel back the onion and you realize it's because illegal immigrants are being treated in veteran healthcare facilities.
Yeah.
You see all this, you're like, stop spinning me.
Right.
Like we're smart enough to see that. And so as a non-politician outsider, I just felt like we've got to take this back.
Yeah.
We've got to stand up and we need a representative who is not going to go along with a national party, who's a team player. Don't get me wrong. Like, I have very solid conservative values. But ultimately, my loyalties lie to this country and to the people.
Of course.
As opposed to a political party.
Yeah, I mean, that's the oath you took.
Correct.
And, politicians actually take a similar oath.
Yeah.
But
they really hold that one up.
There's a big difference. Yeah, I mean, there is a big difference.
Right.
So that's interesting. I mean, I think that, you're touching on some really important things. I do think that, since the split in our state is like 30-30-40.
Correct.
30 Republicans, 30 Democrats, and 40% is independents. How are you reaching the independents? What's your...
Great question. Yeah, great question. So it's actually, I think the Democrats, don't quote me on this, but I think they have us even by like 3 percentage points. So it's Democrat, like if that's 31-28, and then you're right, the independent bloc is over 40. And then the other thing I like to point out to Republicans when we do these town events is even within the Republican Party, 40% voted for Nikki Haley.
Yes.
So the Republican Party is a lot more fractured and has more kind of subsets than the Democrats do. So we have to thread that needle.
Let me stop you there for a minute.
Sure.
I think it's more apparent with Republicans because we talk about it, where the Democrats don't. They just fall into place. And
They're lockstep.
I couldn't watch more than 20 seconds of the DNC. I could not do it. I tried, but no, I couldn't do it. Where I saw in the Republican Party, they did seem to be engaged and pretty excited about this election. And, we actually have people in our states who have said, I won't mention a woman's name, she's been a Republican her whole life, and it's like Republicans for Harris. And I'm thinking, well, that's not really good. I mean, we can't be doing that.
Right.
And but then I guess you look at the thing is, are you party centric or are you, in a position where you want to do exactly what your associates do? I mean, I think that's where we're at there. So when you look at the split, what's your thoughts on that? I mean, you must be reaching some of those people. You have to.
You have to.
If you looked at the last poll I saw, I think Joe Kelly was leading by a little bit. And then I think, I don't know whether it was Holly who
Prescott.
was... Prescott, of course.
Yeah.
Prescott and Holly and then yourself.
Yep.
But the numbers are really close, if I remember. And I think there were like 55 or 60% were undeclared.
Correct. Yeah.
So there's a lot of work to be done, and you're...
Yeah, so you did your homework. Nice job. So Joe Kelly's sitting at 15%.
Right.
Russell's at 10, Holly's at 9, I'm at 5, but the margin for error is 5.3%.
Yeah, so it's like...
So you take away that 5 from the front, you give me in fourth the 5, and like fourth and first, flip-flop.
Yeah.
So essentially it's a complete dead heat. And that margin of error is all, just kind of polling. So,
and no one's running against Pappas, though, right? He's not being
correct.
He's not being primary.
He's not being primary. He's got $2.1 million ready to go for whichever one of us comes out on September 11th. But to your point on the numbers, I feel really good about where we're at, actually. Obviously, you don't want to see any poll where you're not in fourth, but the context of this. I mean this isn't just spin. I feel good about it because when I launched last October, I never ran before.
So you launched in October?
Launched in October.
So you had a lot of work to do because
nobody.
I didn't know who you were.
Nobody. Yeah, people were like Chris Bright. I never heard of her.
I never heard of her.
Yeah.
I love it.
So yeah, I had work to do. I had to get out there. I had to meet people. I had a political thesis that we're too divided. We're ripe for the independents to come over to the Republican Party.
Yeah.
We need somebody that's younger and just more energetic and can just get this group together to solve the border, solve the economy, and kind of these top issues. And I was like, these are all kind of in my wheelhouse.
There you go.
So I launched, but early on, kind of getting that name recognition, I've been to hundreds of events now.
So were you going to, the mistake I think some new people make is they just go to the Republican committee meetings.
Right.
And there's only so many of those.
Start seeing the same people over and over.
And then they're groupies.
Right.
I mean, I've been on several campaigns, even my own, and people would just follow you because they liked you to fill the house.
Right.
And that's not really how you're going to win.
Yeah.
So
exactly,
you went, you launched and went, and so
we had to do that, right? Like you get out there, you want to talk to those people, they talk to other people. Plus, that's where I met Bill Boyd and Ginger. I met great people that were like, come here, young pup. Let me show you, some of the things to do. Steven Stepanek, great people that were incredibly helpful.
And they're willing to mentor, and they're willing to share.
Right.
I'm still doing that. I don't want to run anymore, but I would, I mentor as many as I can.
Helpful.
This show, hopefully, is a way to get the word out about Republicans. We're here to help you win, really, and we say that to all our guests. I mean, we want a strong Republican, conservative in office, but we need Republicans.
Yeah. To close the loop on the pollings, because I'm sitting here saying, I feel really good about being where we are.
Yep.
To get that name out, we raised money, put some money in myself. I didn't want to be beholden to any special interest group.
Sure.
But conserve. And my first team that I hired was actually like a DC-based team. Again, rookie mistake. And I didn't trust them. So in January, I fired that whole team and reset. Yeah. Admittedly, that was a scary time for me because I was like, man, I just walked away from my business that I built from the ground up.
Right.
I have no idea what I'm doing. I've publicly announced, so there's no going back now. And now I'm out here completely on my own. So I had to put together an entirely new team. My first 2 hires were veterans.
Oh, there you go.
And I said, listen, first hire was this my campaign manager, Ashley. She's working over at American Facilities. And she says, I don't know anything about politics. I was like, me neither. Let's do this. But I wanted veterans because I was like, always give it to me straight, and
whether you like it or not.
Right, and don't let me turn into a politician.
Right. Well, in full disclosure, I mean, I worked with General Don Bolduc the first time around. And he had no name recognition, and I had more name recognition than he did, and so did the other person who worked on a campaign, which was Josh McKelvin, who worked for WMUR as their political director at the time. He was no longer there, but he had done that.
Yeah.
So we were able to help him. We didn't win the first time, and the second time, he had a different group together, which is understandable.
Yep.
And so we were happy to see him, but it took a lot of work, as you know. So I can, I can tell you that it's not easy, but you're still out here. You were here in October. When did you really start thinking you might have a shot? Because it couldn't have been from day one. But you might have thought that anyway. Because,
it's like...
you're not going to beat yourself up. You wouldn't have ran if you didn't think you could win, right?
Well, I mean, I knew it was going to be an uphill challenge.
Yeah.
To run, to go from complete obscurity to winning the seat was always going to be a huge task. But look, I said I wanted to go to West Point. I was told I wasn't going to go to West Point. Literally was told, you're not coming this year.
Yeah.
And then some kid in New Jersey gave up his slot and went. I got in Bosnia, we got this group to work together that had not worked together since war broke out. These
so a lot
kind of things,
skills that you can...
It's like, hold my beer. If you tell me I can't do something, it's like, okay, hold my beer.
Yeah.
But when did I think we started to have a chance? I mean, it was probably 2-3 months ago. You just started to feel the momentum.
Yeah.
And we launched we really started advertising just June 1st. So October through June for me was ground game. Learn, figure out my platform, who I am, what I stand for, kind of test, like, can I go through the fire, have my principles challenged and everything I believe and still stay who I am? That's important to me.
Yep.
And then put the infrastructure in place to go out and win this thing. And so I approached it how I built my business.
You know, and that's important to people too, what you just said.
What's that?
Well, that you're not going to change. You know, that this is who you are, this is who I'm going to be if elected.
Yeah.
And that's really important because I think we've seen too many politicians go down there with that in mind and then get trapped into the, you know, to the works of the of Congress.
Yeah.
And that's difficult to do.
It's important to build a team around yourself that will call you out. And I rely on my West Point classmates. I got a handful of buddies on a group text, and they'll be like, dude, don't ever say that again, or, you know, proud of you, this or that. Like, just, you know, or if there's something, like, for example, I got asked at a debate, and we knew this was going to be a question, like, who did you vote for in the primary?
Right.
And, you know, one of the candidates didn't answer.
Last time.
This last primary.
Yeah.
And, like, I'm on record as saying I voted for Nikki Haley.
Right.
And I like Donald Trump. I voted for Trump in 16 and 20.
Right.
I just felt like at that point this past January, Donald Trump was older, a bunch of baggage. I felt like the country was polarized. And look, I mean, I don't think even if you're an ardent Donald Trump supporter, you can look at every last tweet. If you looked at every last tweet and thing he said and was like, I agree with that, you're not being true to yourself.
Yeah.
He said some silly things. And the policies of him and Nikki Haley were very similar, and I was like, you know what? I kind of want to see if we can go a little bit younger. So I'm unapologetic about that.
Right.
I'm still 100% supporting Donald Trump. I like pretty much every last one of his policies.
Yeah.
And as long as those policies align with those of CD1 in New Hampshire, I'll support them.
You're good, right.
I'll support them. But I'm not a Donald Trump fanboy. I'm not a fanboy of any politician. Right? Like, again, as we talked about, you swear an oath to the Constitution.
Right.
And so you stand up for that first, and it's your job to represent the people in New Hampshire. And if that aligns with Trump and his policies, we have no problems. If it doesn't, you need somebody that's going to stand up and be like, hey, can we just take another look at this? Because this is going to hurt us.
Right.
And so there's that. But when I was going to be asked that question, it was like, crap, this is going to be, like, I'm going to piss people off. Like, the base is not going to like that. But I will always be honest.
Yeah.
I'll always be honest with you, and I'll explain why I'm thinking that way. And at least, if you don't agree with me, at least you know where my heart's at.
Sure.
And where we're trying to go. And I also view this, I hate the term politician, I like the term representative. Because it really doesn't matter who I voted for and what I think. Because
how are you going to represent us?
That's right. It's really like, what do you think?
Right.
What do you think?
Right.
Like, let's come back together in December after we win this thing.
Yeah.
And let's sit down and say, what do we want to tackle first?
Yeah.
That's what a good elected official should be doing. What are your views, your views, your views? Let's figure out what the plurality
So what have
wants
you
and
been
what's the
hearing
strategy.
out there? I mean, you know, if you look at the spin doctors, I happen to go on to a station, it's a mix of all the groups, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, BBC, and it's kind of interesting if you listen to that because three of them are not talking the way I thought it was. You know, I lean a little bit more toward Fox News, but I want to hear everything else.
Yeah.
So what are you hearing while you're out there from our voters? Are they concerned just about national stuff? Are they concerned? I mean, what are you hearing?
It's all over the place. Well, you know what? If I had to put a general label on it, people are frustrated. And it's not just this year. I mean, this has been brewing for a decade. People don't feel like they've been listened to. Nobody trusts Congress and politicians and elected leaders because they do. They just get up there and sell you a bunch of crap.
Yep.
They'll lie to you. They have no problem saying one thing, and then once they get there doing something different. It's just, again, the antithesis of what I've been taught a leader does at West Point. You're honest, you're transparent, you're working on behalf of the people that you're honored to serve. So I think first and foremost, people were tired of the dysfunction. They're like, man, I got to perform when I get up and go to my job.
I'm accountable.
Great, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's none of that. We'll shut the government down. We won't pass a balanced budget. We'll sloppily withdraw from Afghanistan. And people got killed. Sorry. There's zero accountability.
Let's leave all our equipment there because let's
billions
get
of
out while
dollars
we
of stuff.
can.
Right. it's just everywhere you look, it just seems like this is the best we can put forward.
Yeah.
And so I feel that very intensely when you're out there. People are angry and they're vocal about it. But, you know, men and women's sports is something that I hear a lot of. In fact, we had Riley Gaines, the swimmer, was here just 2 weeks ago. She was fantastic.
Yeah.
The abortion issue, we're not talking about too much here on the Republican side, but we know we're going to get attacked on it.
Oh, sure.
So,
but it's been that way for 20 years.
Yep.
I mean, it's. I can remember working with Ovid LaMontagne. That goes way back, and people on the other side dressed up like pills. You know, like abortion pills.
I remember that.
And I'm thinking, really, is this what we are coming to? You know, and those are just one issue voters. And those are the toughest ones, I think, to pull over. But we need, I believe, as Republicans, we need an answer to that.
Good messaging.
Yeah,
right.
we do. We need good messaging. And if you look at what the state's done, I mean, 6 months, up to 6 months, they can have an abortion.
Yeah.
You know, somebody said to me one day, "Why? You know, we say we're pro-life. Why aren't we telling them they're pro-death?" Well, that's maybe the wrong approach.
Chris Sager's doing a good job with that at the
Another
party
West
level.
Pointer.
He is another West Pointer. Yeah.
Exactly.
But Chris recognized that.
Yeah.
And so a couple of months ago, they started pushing out videos and messaging, just educating New Hampshire voters on what the actual policy is here.
Yeah.
And we're really not the extremists on this issue.
No. And the continuities comes up, but I think there's a lot more to talk about.
Yeah.
At least I hope there is. I hope that our message is, okay, that's one thing. Can we set that aside just for a minute? And let's talk about other issues. Do you have enough money to feed your family? Can you buy a house?
Well, those are the other issues.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's what we have to do. And I'm hopefully you're doing it and the other candidates are. I think they get hung up with that abortion question sometimes and they let it continue. And I know, you know, watching news, you know, with Adam Sexton, you know, he constantly brings that up, you know. And I understand why he's doing it, but he also brings up some questions to the other side, too, about things.
Yeah.
But
Adam's fair. He did ask me about that on the first close-up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easier now for me as a federal candidate than my predecessors because now it's a state's issue.
Yes.
And honestly, I think that's a good. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I think
I
that's
agree.
a good place. When you have contentious issues like that, the closer you can get it to the electorate, the better.
Absolutely.
And so that's my answer. We kind of get in, we get out on that, and oh, by the way, that aligns with how I believe. So it all works out.
Exactly.
Yep.
So, well, that's really good. So what is your next step? So you're going to all of these. How are you getting, we started this early and never did get it pushed it enough, but how are you getting to the independents? What are you doing to reach
so that
them?
goes back to why I feel good about where we're sitting. So I built my business. I bootstrapped it, did every job myself. And so when I built that, you would have to take the money and you'd invest it and you'd look at the metrics and you'd have to make sure that the money you were putting to work was generating the maximum amount of ROI.
Right.
Crazy, right? Like, why is this? It's not rocket science, but yet we can't seem to get to this on a policy level. But so with respect to running for office, like for me, I couldn't go head to head against Chris Pappas traditionally.
Right.
2.1 million when we have 7 weeks to turn around it's just. So back off of that. And I expect to win the primary, how are we going to be well positioned to take on this Goliath?
Right.
A political Goliath who is well liked, entrenched. He's the incumbent. He's got a ton of money. It's a well-funded machine.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's figure out what David did. Right. You don't go head to head against him. And so I started building a very strategic kind of like Facebook, X, and an Instagram campaign. And so we right now are averaging 9 new followers an hour.
That's great.
And we right now have reach within the 1st congressional district of 251,000 people.
Wow.
So that's way more than
So
we would
this is how you're reaching the younger people too, I would think.
Everybody. I mean, I'll send this to you afterwards and show it to you. But actually, it's not skewed towards younger. It's kind of the 35 to 55 is what's carrying us. And what's very promising is a lot of those are independent voters.
Yeah.
These are people that are engaging with our content, have liked us, have reached out. And so even though we're sitting at that 5%, again, we started from almost zero,
Yeah.
well, from zero, back on June 1st.
Yeah.
And that poll was taken last week, so we're talking like, let's just call it August 14th, 15th.
Yeah.
When they snapped the line on August 15th, and we were basically within the margin of error of being tied, but our trend line, I showed it to you before we went on camera.
Yeah.
I mean, it's steep.
Yeah, it is.
And so we're coming up. They snapped the line, but we've gone through that. And that's allowed us to speak directly to voters. I don't have to go through paid media. I don't have to spend all this money.
Yeah, I've seen some of your ads on Facebook.
Oh, good. I like that. But I
have.
could target independent voters, Republican voters from certain demographics.
How about college kids? How about kids who are up here at school and are going to vote?
Yep.
I mean, have you reached out to them? I'm a firm believer that Republicans have a tendency to stay away from colleges because they think they're all liberals. Well, guess what? They're not.
They're not.
They're not all liberals.
Right.
I mean, I got involved with a hockey team at one of the colleges this year as, just kind of as a sponsor, wanted to be part of the group and take care of the kids and stuff. Cool. And I asked them one day, I said, so how do you guys vote? And they looked at me and they said, we're team players. We're all Republicans. Huh. And I couldn't believe that. But the more I thought about it, yeah, because they have to have each other's backs. They have to be disciplined. They're accountable for what they do. So they look at the other stuff and they say, nah, I don't want to do that.
I love that.
So
yeah.
I think that's still a place where we need to go.
It is. Obviously anybody 18 or over, we're
right.
targeting. So,
right.
If you're a conservative, you're kind of showing up. Anyone from 18 on,
good.
We're hitting, and town by town within the district, kind of pushing.
So
that
do people
message out
say
there.
to you, well, that's really nice, but you don't have a voting record?
I haven't heard that.
Good.
No. In fact.
But you know what? That's not a bad thing, really, because people are, like you said, they're tired of what's going on in D.C. So we have about, we don't have a lot of time left. So I'd like you to ask or tell our listeners, our viewers, how they can contact you, and maybe you need some help with something other than money.
Yeah.
And just let them know, and then we can talk a few minutes after.
Sure.
I want to make sure you get that in, because a lot of times we look up and we only have like 2 minutes left, and so you got to babble it out. But so what's the best way to get a hold of you?
So our website is www.chrisbright.org. That's BRIGHT.org. And then you can find us on Facebook, X, and Instagram. If you just look up Chris Bright for Congress or Chris Bright for New Hampshire, it'll pop up. And so, but we do live town halls. We're not going to do one tomorrow just because we've got a fundraiser tomorrow night, a private fundraiser. But usually on Thursday nights.
So
we
where's
do
your
live town hall.
fundraiser? Do you want to mention that?
It's in Portsmouth, but it's at someone's house. It's closed.
Yeah, okay.
So it won't be something that will open up to the public. But But yeah, it's a good group of people coming together to kind of support the cause.
Yeah, and so, I've seen signs out, and when I first moved up here from Annapolis, I couldn't understand why you needed signs. I mean, signs don't vote.
Right.
Well, you learn pretty quickly that people take you serious if you have a big sign.
Yeah.
If you only put the little yard signs up and you randomly place them, that's not as good as one placed in front of somebody's house, right?
Right.
So I found it kind of interesting that that's the way New Hampshire people looked at it. I think that I'd like to see an opportunity for you here because, you're saying a lot of things that I think people are concerned with right now. And the other candidates, they're good candidates. Some of them have been in politics for a while, and that doesn't always play well. It seems to me like people are looking more toward non-politicians if they actually have something to say, and if they have a plan, which it seems like you do.
So early on, I got attacked with like, oh, you don't have any experience.
Right.
And it came from one of the career politicians.
Of course.
And I said, see, that's the problem right there. You look at me as having no experience.
Right.
When I was the guy out, boots on the ground, enforcing America's foreign policy, saw firsthand what good and bad policy looks like. I built a company from scratch. You know, I know how to balance a budget. I know what it's like.
And you've signed
to
the top
hire.
of the check, not
you
the
sign,
back of
yeah,
it.
you sign the front and the backs of the checks at this point, right? And all of these different things. We didn't talk too much about it, but in 2014, I owned a gym that had a police shooting. I lost everything.
A police shooting?
Police shooting, yeah, in Salem.
Wow.
I was bankrupt. I went through an entire winter with no heat or electricity that year. I lost everything. In fact, you know, almost took my life that winter. Was just very despondent. The police even tried to frame me for a crime. And I had to make the decision whether I was going to fight this or stand up and or basically take a plea deal, and decided what kind of guy would I be if I rolled over and got up in front of a judge and lied, admitted guilt to a crime I didn't commit. During that process, I went bankrupt. My house went into foreclosure.
Wow.
You know, that entire winter, single dad, 4 kids, no heat, no electricity. And my first real job back was I was working at the Manchester VA for $7.50 an hour. Master's degree from MIT, master's degree from University of Missouri. In 2000, I was a top officer in the U.S. Army. All these accolades, West Point grad.
Yeah.
And there I was taking used colonoscopy scopes down to the basement to be sterilized. And then my first real job back was I got hired to run a landscaping company up in Portland, Maine. So I was driving from Derry
To Portland, Maine?
Every single day to run this company. 60% of the company was in recovery. And we built that thing from a $7 million organization to $110 million in 2 years through organic growth. And all of that was great. I won CEO of the Year and a couple other awards. But the thing I'm most proud of was we were named to the Maine Best Places to Work list for the first time in that company's 25-year history on a blind survey of 400 employees. I was able to give them careers. And so it's been a real grind and struggle kind of coming back and building. And today, like I said, I'm founder and CEO of a company that's nationwide. And you know, to kind of pivot from absolute despair to, you know, where I'm at now, I feel an obligation to help people, to make a difference, to kind of take everything I've gone through and put it towards good and kind of with a level of intentionality kind of serve and lead by example to help this country come back and start solving the problems that we need to get to work on.
Sounds great. I mean, I think you've got a great story, but you've actually proven it.
Yeah,
you know,
thank you.
Some people will tell stories, and that's all they have is a story, but nothing else to back it up.
That's my experience, right?
Yeah.
And so to go and, like, I could figure out parliamentary procedure. I could figure out, you know, some of these, you know, the blocking and tackling of, you know, getting to DC. But I know what it's like to struggle. I know what it's like for everyday Americans and Granite Staters who are going through the crap, you know, and might not feel like the end is like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. But I've been there. Like, I know that you could change your stars literally at any time. You could change that story. And I'm out to prove that. We're going to go from complete obscurity to winning this nomination. And then we have a really good chance at beating Chris Pappas. We're trending in the right direction. And if we do that, I'll be coming back to you in December. Let's all come back together and let's start figuring out how to get ourselves out of this mess.
So I wish you good luck with this.
Thanks,
and
JP.
I'm glad you
Appreciate
came on. Next week, I have a very good friend of mine, my favorite Navy captain. Captain Lynn Blankenbecker will be on. She's working at the Pentagon right now, and she's going to come and tell me exactly what she does, because we haven't talked about it. So Lynn's going to come back here and see us next week. So thanks again, Chris, for being on, and we'll see you next week.
Good morning. Well, good morning. Wow, what a day. Good afternoon. Welcome to the, or good evening. Welcome to the Will and Joe Show. I am your co-host, Will Infantine. Joe is not here this evening. He's out speaking about why people should vote for him for Congress in the 1st Congressional District. So I'm here tonight at 7:30. John Stephen will be joining us tonight. John is running for the office of Executive Counsel. We'll talk a little bit about the council and about his campaign. You know, folks, if you've noticed lately, things are getting a little hot and heavy. Or maybe you're getting all these mailers, you know, that I'm getting and what have you. More often than not, people don't pay attention to politics during the summer. You know, June, July, the kids get out of school in mid to late June, and it's like, hey, let's go do something. And the weather was great in July, people were doing things. And it used to be the last week or so of August, but now with a lot of schools, sports starting, and other sports starting the 15th of the month of August, a lot of kids are back, a lot of people are done with their vacations, and people are starting to pay attention. And that, as you will know, now that the Olympics are over, there were a few political commercials during that period of time, but now you're starting to see, and you'll see even more now that the Democrat convention is this week. When that's over, you'll see a significant ramp up in television commercials for some of the candidates. There are actually two commercials I'm going to show this evening in a minute, but I just want to talk about a few things here in the city. I had spoken with Mayor Way today, and I was hoping to get him on here this evening, but he is over at the Fisher Cats Stadium throwing out the first pitch and speaking today. I guess is Fentanyl Awareness Day. Obviously trying to teach kids how bad heroin is and what fentanyl is, and how a couple little grams of this powder could just stop your heart and your respiratory system like that. So he's over there, but he did give me some items to talk about tonight about what's going on in the city. The new laws that were passed and signed by Governor Sununu having to do with bail reform, unfortunately, won't be reformed until 1/1 of 2025. Well, law enforcement and a number of us wanted that to happen sooner. There are certain things in the law that need to be addressed. You have to write a few rules and other things and get people adjusted to give some time to how the new procedure is going to be. But that will start to take effect, but unfortunately not for another 3 or 4 months. If you've noticed, there's a crew of people working within the city district. What are they doing? They're cleaning things up. They're getting rid of trash. So this organization came in, and the mayor and the alderman approved this. And I just happened to notice, I've had two, not incidences, but two connections, I guess, or things that I saw. So I'm at the intersection of Hanover and Elm Street, waiting for the light to turn as I'm coming down off Hanover to come into work one morning. And this young man, probably in his teenager, early 20s, is scraping like handbills and other things that were stuck to a very nice, iron-like light pole. And he was scraping them off, and as they fell to the ground, the wind picked a couple up and kind of threw them into the street. And he didn't just kind of look at it and said, oh, well, they're on the street. He turned around, he picked them up, he stepped into the street, picked up 2 pieces of paper, put them in this little receptacle thing, and he kept scraping. I was just impressed, because some people, they weren't big pieces of paper, but they were, the wind will blow them or whatever. So I was impressed with that. Secondly, a guy with this, I don't know, you've seen them probably in the grocery stores or whatever. It's like a big lawnmower that sucks up debris and dirt and things. And he was sucking stuff up and whatever. And he saw me coming dressed like this with a suitcase or whatever going into my office. So he stopped the thing from blowing or vibrating or sucking up because it makes a little bit of dust. And I just nodded and said thank you, and he was very pleasant. Hi, have a nice day. I was like, okay, well, these guys, I'd read in the newspaper, the Union Leader last Sunday, that they're out there, they're doing these things. So I talked to the mayor, as I said today, and he's shocked. They have, in the last 30 days, picked up 3,100 pounds of trash. And he says, all that trash has been sitting around because Mayor Craig wouldn't do anything about it. And I said, well, what do you mean she wouldn't do anything about it? Well, apparently, this company and this contract became available. The mayor wouldn't bring it to the alderman because they were not union. The employees are not unionized, so she would not bring them. So we talk sometimes about politics and why things are done and why things are done for the right reasons and how things are done for the wrong reasons. And because she was going to run for governor, she didn't want to bring this up because she didn't want to be accused of hiring a non-union contractor to do work in the city of Manchester, which is just abject foolishness, but that's just the way it works here in the city. Unions, for better or for worse, I think unions were probably one of the best things that ever happened to this country when they were formed. And then in the 70s, they kind of got out of control. And now the unions have trouble because the youngins, they don't care. I'm going to digress this for a second. We're talking about the difference between maybe the different generations. And yes, I am 60 years of age, and I am becoming a little bit of that guy, like, those young kids, they don't know what anything. They don't know what patriotism is. They don't know what this is. They don't know what hard work is. I used to walk uphill both ways in the snow in the school. Yeah. I get that from my kids, too, when I bring up some of those things. They were talking about, I think it was a fire or police, a woman who was married to, I think it was a firefighter. And that she said, when we were young and we were starting out, my husband would take any extra duty he could, any overtime he could. because we wanted to build a house and start a family and have some nicer things. And we just took everything we could. And sometimes we were exhausted on the weekends, okay, because we had worked so much during the week. But, that's what we did as young people to try to get ahead. She says, now they can't get the young people that are employed there to take any of the shifts. Now, I understand this thing about work-life balance, and I'm probably guilty of not having a good work-life balance because how much I work in the legislature and TV show. But, I never missed any of my kids' things. You try to find any balance you can. I just find that interesting. But that was just a little thing that just popped in my mind. So I digress about the younger generation not really want to work and the issues that some of the municipalities are having with some of their younger recruits, fire and police or whatever, taking extra duties. But unions, as I said, were probably one of the best things that happened to this country. We got away from these, these mills behind us. They stand now and they're big and they're beautiful and they stand the test of time. But some of the things that went on there, people working 6 days a week, kids working, young kids, 10, 12 years old, going to school and then going to the factories or whatever, or dropping out of school at ridiculously young ages and working in the factories. And they worked under poor conditions and things like that. So the unions did a great job in such respect. I think then they got a little greedy and fat and happy. And some of the issues that some of the industries they almost destroyed and did destroy, from the steel industry to almost the car industry and some of these other things, getting out of control. If you guys all remember the 70s, if you're old enough out there, how many strikes there were all the time of these things. Well, the younger generation doesn't seem to be as involved with the unions, and it doesn't seem to be as rah-rah with the unions as the old folks. But not everything is union. And in the state of New Hampshire, there's very few union contractors. There are very, very few union companies. And to not hire a company to do something that is good for the citizens because they were not a union contractor, I find just politically ridiculously stupid. And unfortunately, well, I have nothing personal against Mayor Craig. She's a nice enough lady, and I'm sure she's a great wife and mother and such. Some of the decisions that people make to be a hardcore politician are just boggle my mind. I hope I'm not that bad. I think I'm not. I think I do what's best for the citizens of Manchester and the state, and not what's good for any different group or organization or my political party. What else have they done? The $500,000 that the aldermen and the mayor have given to the City of Manchester Police Department to go out and start enforcing some of these rules and laws,